August 7, 1943. Sicily. Major General Terry Allen stands in a room briefing his officers for the next attack. His 1st Infantry Division, the legendary Big Red One, has just fought its way through some of the toughest combat of the war. The mailbag from 2 Corps headquarters arrives in the next room. Staff officers open it and find a dispatch. They read it, look at each other in shock, and realize they have to tell their general immediately. One officer walks in and wordlessly hands Allen the paper. Allen reads it, nods, says a few words under his breath, then continues his briefing with tears streaming down his face. He's just been fired. 2 days later, Time magazine hits newsstands with Allen on the cover. The story calls him a great division commander in the making who is gaining a personal luster. The magazine doesn't know yet that he's already been relieved of command and sent home in disgrace. This is the story of how the U.S. Army fired its best combat general at the height of his success, and what that reveals about what the military really valued during World War II. Terry Allen commanded the 1st Infantry Division through North Africa and Sicily. His combat record was unbroken victories. At El Guitar in Tunisia, his division fought 2 German panzer divisions to a standstill, forcing Rommel himself to withdraw. In Sicily, his men slugged through the toughest battles of the campaign. British General Harold Alexander called him the best division leader he'd seen in either World War. And Omar Bradley fired him anyway. Terry de la Mesa Allen was born April 1, 1888, at Fort Douglas, Utah. His father was an Army colonel. His mother was Spanish. His grandfather fought at Gettysburg for the Union. Everything about his background said he'd be a successful officer. Except for one problem. He failed out of West Point twice. He eventually got commissioned through competitive exam after studying at Catholic University, but the stain never left him. He wasn't part of the West Point Club, and the club never forgot it. World War I changed everything. Allen commanded an infantry battalion at age 30 and led patrols personally into no man's land. He was wounded 4 times. A German bullet shot through his mouth, knocking out molars on both sides and leaving him with a permanent whistle in his voice. Once he was sent to an aid station for treatment, ripped off his wound tag, and returned to the front, where he was wounded again in the same battle. Between the wars, Allen was just another officer slowly climbing the ranks. Then 1940 arrived, and George Marshall became Army Chief of Staff. Marshall looked at the coming war and decided he needed younger, more aggressive commanders. He reached down through the ranks and jumped Lieutenant Colonel Terry Allen over 900 senior officers, promoting him straight to Brigadier General. The jealousy this created would follow Allen for the rest of his career. June 1942, Marshall gave Allen command of the 1st Infantry Division, the Army's most prestigious unit. Allen's command philosophy was simple and brutal. A soldier doesn't fight to save suffering humanity, he told his officers. He fights to prove his unit is the best in the Army, and that he has as much guts as anyone else in it. He hated what he called chicken shit regulations. He cared more about his men getting dry socks than perfect salutes. He'd grown up on Army posts, learning to smoke, chew, cuss, and fight with enlisted men, and he never lost that connection. He was flamboyant, independent, and completely uninterested in following rules that didn't help kill Germans. His pattern for victory was straightforward: wade in and murder the hell out of the low-down, good-for-nothing so-and-sos. He called the enemy squareheads, krauts, boche, wops, and meant every word. This wasn't an intellectual war for Terry Allen. He just wanted to kill Germans. November 1942. Operation Torch. The 1st Division spearheaded the American invasion of North Africa, the first major U.S. ground combat against Germans in the European theater. The early months were disasters. February 1943 brought Kasserine Pass, where the Germans smashed through American lines in a humiliating defeat. Eisenhower sacked Two-Corps Commander Lloyd Fredendall and brought in George Patton to fix the mess. March 17, 1943. Early morning. Patton arrives at a frontline position to watch Allen's division launch an attack. He sees no troop movement, no signs of imminent assault. Patton storms off to find Allen. Furious. "What the hell is this?" he snarls, believing the lack of movement means the attack is proceeding hesitantly. Allen calmly explains that he decided to attack earlier than planned. His troops weren't moving out because they were already standing on their first objectives. Allen had out Patton. The Battle of El Guetar became the turning point. Allen's division fought two panzer divisions to a standstill in a grueling 21-day battle. Rommel, the Desert Fox himself, was forced to withdraw, admitting the enemy had grown too strong for our attack to be maintained. It was the first clear American-led victory over the Germans in the war. The Tunisian campaign continued through May. Combat at Maktar, Mejez El Bab, Gafsa, Bia, Matur. The 1st Division led the American counterattack after Kasserine, started the offensive with the seizure of Gafsa, and closed in for the final drive on Tunis. On March 23rd, a fierce German panzer counterattack threatened to overrun Allen's headquarters. Officers advised withdrawal. Allen refused. "I will like hell pull out," he said, "and I'll shoot the first bastard who does." The headquarters held. The final 17 days in Tunisia cost the division 2,000 casualties. 24 infantry companies were down to fewer than 100 men each when the normal strength was around 200. But on May 13, 1943, 250,000 German and Italian troops surrendered. The Axis was defeated in North Africa, and the Big Red One had led the way. May 1943. The fighting in Tunisia was over, and troops were pulled back to rest areas. While the Allies paraded decorously through Tunis, Allen's division celebrated in its own way. They left a trail of looted wine shops and outraged mayors from Tunisia all the way to Arzew. But Oran was where things really fell apart. Services of supply troops had been stationed in Oran for months, safe in the rear while the 1st Division bled in Tunisia. When combat troops arrived for rest, these rear echelon soldiers closed their clubs and installations to men from the front. The 1st Division, irritated by the exclusion, swarmed into town to liberate it a second time. Violence, drinking, destruction. The division ran amok. The deeper problem wasn't just one riot. Allen had created a division that thought it was above the rules. In combat, you don't salute officers because it helps the enemy identify leaders. Allen let this become custom out of battle too. His whole division adopted what one officer called his cavalier attitude. They were cocky bastards who believed themselves exempted from discipline by virtue of their months on the line. Word reached Eisenhower, who gave the 2nd Corps commander Omar Bradley a royal chewing out. Bradley transferred the blame straight to Allen. Bradley's assessment was harsh. Allen's utter disregard for discipline, everywhere evident in his cocky division. In May 1943, Eisenhower met with Allen personally. He found the division commander mumbling short answers, complaining of high casualties, citing World War I experience, appearing disconsolate and passive. Eisenhower was in no mood to understand or forgive. Omar Bradley was the key figure in what happened next. He'd just received his first combat command after 30 years in the Army. Bradley was particularly sensitive to matters of discipline and protocol, and he saw Allen as a direct threat to his authority. Terry's own career as an Army rebel, Bradley wrote, had long ago disproved the maxim that discipline makes a good soldier. Having broken the mold himself, he saw no need to apply it to his troops. On Allen's assistant commander, Theodore Roosevelt Jr., son of the president, Bradley was equally harsh. Roosevelt had to go with Allen for he, too, had sinned by loving the division too much. This is worth understanding. Bradley didn't fire Allen for losing battles. He fired him for loving his division too much and for not respecting Bradley's authority. Bradley would go on to relieve more division and regimental commanders than any other senior U.S. general in World War II. Before the invasion of Sicily, Bradley wanted Allen fired. Patton refused. "I won't go without them," Patton told Eisenhower. "I want those sons of bitches." When Eisenhower criticized the 1st Division's discipline, Patton contradicted him directly. "I told him he was mistaken," Patton later wrote, "and that anyhow no one whips a dog before putting him into a fight." Patton had correctly predicted that the Gala landings would be the hardest in Sicily, and he insisted on using the 1st Division for the toughest mission. He got his way. July through August 1943, the 1st Division led the invasion and fought through Sicily's mountainous interior. The Battle of Troina lasted a week, with the Germans launching 24 counterattacks. Allen's division won. Patton called it the hardest battle of the Sicily campaign. General John Lucas said it was the toughest fight of the war to that point, another unbroken string of victories. But in August, Patton slapped 2 soldiers in field hospitals, accusing them of cowardice. When the press got wind of it, Patton's influence collapsed. Bradley saw his opportunity. Allen's protector was compromised. Bradley needed a pretext. He claimed the initial assault on Troina had failed because of Allen's poor leadership. The reality was that the attack had been carried out by the 39th Infantry Regiment from the 9th Division, temporarily attached to Allen's command just days before. It wasn't Allen's fault, but it was a convenient excuse. August 7, 1943. Middle of the Sicily campaign. Allen is briefing officers for the next attack when the mailbag from 2 Corps arrives. Staff officers discover a dispatch relieving both Allen and Roosevelt of command. They tell Allen immediately. He reads it, nods, continues his briefing with tears in his eyes. No warning had been given. He learned from an official dispatch in a mailbag, not face-to-face. The humiliation was total. Major General Clarence Hubner, a Marshall favorite, replaced Allen. The official reason was that the division was becoming unmanageably elitist, and that the whole division had assumed Allen's cavalier attitude. 2 days later, the Time magazine cover story praising Allen as a great division commander in the making hit newsstands. He was already fired when it published. The division artillery commander later recalled, "It was painful to see Terry break down. Many wondered if he would ever recover." Allen felt shanghaied. Years later, Bradley claimed full responsibility in his memoirs. But Eisenhower's papers tell a more complex story. "It is a terrible injustice to General Allen to hint that he was relieved for inefficiency," Eisenhower wrote. "I will be glad to have General Allen again as a division commander." The truth is that Allen was relieved because of a combination of factors: his lack of discipline, his threat to Bradley's authority, his maverick personality, and the institutional Army's need for conformity. He won every battle, but he couldn't fit into the system that Bradley and Eisenhower were building. October 15, 1943. Just 2 months after being fired and declared not fit to command, Terry Allen took over the 104th Infantry Division at Camp Adair, Oregon. This was unheard of. Fired generals don't get second chances. But George Marshall reached down again and gave Allen command of the Timberwolves, a brand new division of mostly draftees. Allen had learned lessons from Tunisia and Sicily. Night attacks, he discovered, caused fewer casualties. Fortifications and massed guns were less effective in darkness. He made night fighting the 104th specialty, requiring 30 to 35 hours per week of night training when the Army's standard was 8 to 12, 3 to 4 times more than required. His constant refrain to his troops: find 'em, fix 'em, fight 'em, take the high ground, inflict maximum damage with minimum casualties. Night attack, night attack, night attack. And Allen did something that directly contradicted Bradley's criticism. The first thing on his agenda for the 114th was strict discipline. He would not tolerate unshaven or slovenly troops. He maintained his independence and contempt for regulations that didn't matter, but he enforced combat readiness rigorously. September 7, 1944. The 104th landed in France at Cherbourg. Allen's first stop was the Normandy Cemetery to visit Ted Roosevelt's grave. Roosevelt had died of a heart attack 5 weeks after leading troops ashore at Utah Beach on D-Day. October 23, 1944. The division entered combat serving with British and Canadian forces. Canadian General G.G. Simons reported after their first action, "Once the Timberwolves got their teeth into the Boche, they showed great dash." What followed was 195 consecutive days of combat without giving up ground once. The Timberwolves became masters of night fighting. Multiple attacks were conducted with only bayonets and grenades, no rifle ammunition. They captured the city of Eschweiler via pre-dawn insertion into the city center. A midnight attack on Leukersburg saw them spotted immediately after crossing a river, but they pressed on anyway, seizing houses and holding them against counterattacks all night and the following day. The division raced across Germany. They replaced Allen's old 1st Division at Aachen. They crossed the Rhine at the Remagen bridgehead and advanced 193 miles in 9 days. Another advance covered 175 miles in 15 days. They captured Cologne, Halle, Bitterfeld, Delitzsch. April 11, 1945. The Timberwolves liberated Nordhausen concentration camp and witnessed Nazi atrocities firsthand. April 27, 1945. The 104th Infantry Division became the first U.S. unit to link up with the Soviet Red Army at the Elbe River. It marked the practical end of the war in Europe. Bradley, now commanding the 12th Army Group, arrived in Cologne to meet with Allen. "Terry," Bradley said, "I'm pleasantly surprised to see these young Timberwolves of yours already ranked along with the 1st and the 9th as the finest assault divisions in the Ito." Allen responded, "Brad, the 1st and the 9th are in damned fast company." The man Bradley had fired was back, and he'd just proven Bradley completely wrong. The 104th's final tally: 1,445 killed in action, 4,801 wounded, 111 missing. Eisenhower wrote to Allen on October 23, 1944, "I know you will get along splendidly with your British associates. You are an experienced commander, and I expect nothing but the best from you." Terry Allen never lost a single battle in his entire military career, not in World War I and not in World War II. So why did the Army fire its best combat general? The answer reveals something fundamental about military institutions. Terry Allen won every battle he fought, but he threatened something the Army valued more than victory in any single engagement: institutional control. Bradley and Eisenhower were building a modern bureaucratic army capable of coordinating millions of men across multiple theaters. That required conformity, discipline, and generals who would follow orders from higher command without question. Allen represented the old way: maverick, independent, loyal to his men before the institution. The stated reasons for firing Allen were discipline problems and the division becoming unmanageably elitist. The real reasons ran deeper. Allen was unresponsive to Bradley's orders. He wasn't West Point and wasn't part of the club. He'd been jumped over 900 officers to get his command, creating institutional jealousy. And Bradley and Eisenhower simply didn't like him. The cost of firing Allen was immediate. The best combat commander was sent home mid-campaign. Soldiers who loved him were devastated. The message sent was clear: conformity matters more than results. But the story has a more complex ending. Marshall gave Allen a second chance because talent still mattered. And Allen proved on that second chance that he could deliver both victory and discipline, though he did it on his own terms. The U.S. Army in World War II judged generals on two scales: combat effectiveness and institutional fit. You could be brilliant in combat and still get fired if you couldn't fit the system. Allen proved you could be both, but it took him 2 tries. Today, West Point gives the General Terry de la Mesa Allen Award to the student with highest rating in military science. The general who failed out of West Point twice became the model for what West Point tries to produce. Allen retired August 31, 1946. In October 1967, his son, Lieutenant Colonel Terry de la Mesa Allen Jr., was killed in Vietnam commanding a battalion of Allen's old 1st Infantry Division. Allen's health collapsed after his son's death. He suffered small strokes and a heart condition, describing himself as going in and out of reality. He died September 12, 1969, and was buried at Fort Bliss National Cemetery alongside his son. Is this a private war, or can anybody get in it? That was Terry Allen's favorite question. For him, war was personal and intimate, about leading men in combat. For the Army, war was institutional and bureaucratic, about managing a massive organization. Both perspectives were necessary. Both were right. The tension between them shaped how America fought World War II. Terry Allen lived and died in that tension, proving that sometimes the best generals are the ones the Army almost throws away.